Hello, Comic-Con. As you see, we have an amazing panel. We're going to talk about editing and cinematography, and I just want to get right into it. So, okay. Everybody's got an origin story. Last time did. Yeah. Everybody's got an origin story? Okay. Everybody's got an origin story. Okay, everybody's got an origin story. What one film or television show did you see that made you say, ooh, I'm interested in knowing more about this? And Daysha, I'm gonna start with you.
I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, and so I was like a big Robert Zemeckis fan, and I was obsessed with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Back to the Future, and things like that. So that got me really interested in how films were made, and I think by the time I got to college, I got more interested in editing specifically after having seen City of God. It's like one of my favorite films. I had long, probably annoying conversations with my professors about it because I was so impressed with particularly the opening sequence where the editor puts you in the point of view of a chicken, and you just, and I feel like now as a professional I kind of look at that film and I go, this film could have started 6 different ways, but they chose to start with these cuts to black and sharpening a knife and reveal that it's a chicken who's watching all of this, and the chicken knows it's about to die, and you feel bad for the chicken in 20 seconds, and that's all a product of just great editing and tension building and pacing, and then you reveal the protagonist, and then you reveal the antagonist. So I was really enthralled and obsessed with that movie for a really long time, and that's the one that kind of locked me into editing and learning what editing was.
Oh, love that. Greg, what about you?
Well, I was pretty young when Star Wars came out, the first one, 1977, and that was the first one that kind of like blew me away and like transported me as a kid. So I was just kind of sucked into the visuals in the world, and then I became curious with how that was created, all the illusions and everything else, and it was more of a storytelling kind of curiosity. So that sort of started. Then it was like playing with the Super 8 movie camera, back when it was filmed when I was a kid, and that was the beginning of that. Sort of trying to untangle that was the beginning of it.
Kristi.
Well, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but one of my favorite movies growing up was Hook. I absolutely loved it, and it was really one of those movies that really taught me about the emotion of a story. It was kind of one of those early movies for me where you learn about loss and coming of age, and like you learn what it's like for a character to have such a large arc. And so for me, it was really a seminal film, and of course, it has huge production value, and it's very magical. And so I think it was just one of those movies that sticks with me when I think about movies that made an impact, that made me want to get into film. And it's one of those movies I return to when I'm like, I just need something to like remind me why I want to be here and why it's important. And so I love the movie Hook.
What about you, Aaron?
So I started editing not by watching something that I loved, by something that I thought was not good. So I was watching a music video one day when I was in high school, and I was like, this is terrible. I could do better than this. And so, but this was, mid-90s. There was no editing software, that was affordable back then. And so I took my dad's camera and I started editing in camera. So I would plan out these music video shoots where, I would do one take where, the people's mouths were, moving to the lyrics. And then I would plan out and I would edit in, basically, insert shots at all the right, places. And that's how I sort of taught myself how to edit. And then later, one of these, music videos that I had made, through all this in-camera editing, I ended up showing them to this director. And I didn't know at the time that this director had been nominated for 2 Academy Awards. And he said, "Oh, you're an artist. Do you want to do a film with me?" And that was how my career got started.
Wow. That was fantastic. Also, that move that you did, I called it the Octavia Butler. because she started writing science fiction because she was watching a sci-fi movie and was like, this is awful.
Oh, yeah,
I can
yeah.
write better science fiction than this. And then we got Octavia Butler.
Yeah, so sometimes inspiration comes from what you don't like.
Exactly.
That's how we got Insecure, because Issa Rae was tired of not seeing Issa Rae.
Yeah,
I should be on these shows.
Yeah, someone awkward like me. Yeah.
That's right. Disrespect can be the disrespect of
Right.
watching a thing can be an inspiration.
Right.
So, okay, let's get into. Thank you for sharing those origins, Daysha. I'm gonna come back to you because, you're an Emmy Award winner for editing the Black Lady Sketch Show, right?
Mhm.
And the Black Lady Courtroom. It's like, so, how do you approach editing sketch comedy? Because you can imagine, like, you're in post-production, there's beats, right? There's tones, there's maybe like improvisation and everything. There's this whole humorous element, melody, that you don't want to lose in post.
Yeah.
So how do you start, what's your process as you approach editing a sketch comedy?
Well, editing comedy is hard. It's probably the hardest genre I've worked on. I think that with sketch, especially with a Black Lady sketch show, because Robin Thede, who is the star but also executive producer, she allows the cast to just go for it. Like they do a couple of takes as scripted, and then there's always the fun take in which everyone just improvs lines. I think Lauren Ashley Smith was probably like pitching lines on the side and going, okay, now say this. And so you get back to post and you have a lot of material to work with, which is great and terrible at the same time if there's a time crunch. But I think my approach to it, because you can ruin it in the edit. Like there's like a good vibe on set and the dailies come back and it's hilarious. If you don't cut it right, you can ruin that humor, and the timing of a joke can be ruined in the edit. So very delicate with it, and you have to have a sense of humor if you cut comedy, because you have to know comedy pacing and timing and reactions. Sometimes the reactions of Ashley Nicole Black were funnier than the joke pitch. So like it was like you have to figure out how to use what. What I would do with all the improv is I would just lay it all out in a sequence, would lay out every option and just play it over and over and over again. And usually there was one joke that I kept laughing at every time. Or one that I just felt like, I want other people to see this joke. It's like, this is hilarious. It was not scripted, and I don't know why she moved her head like that, but it's funny. So I'll build my editor's cut based on what I think is funny, and pitch it to Robin Thede, and just try to make the funniest version of it possible. But every sketch in that show was a different genre. So it was like we were cutting 45 short films for like, there were interstitials, which were like 3 per episode, 6 episodes. And that was like a narrative through line of the show. But in between those were the sketches, and each one was a mini short film. So we had 3 editors, and we had to cut each one as if it were a short film, which takes a lot of time. But we had 2 days. So we would do a
how many
sketch.
editors?
3 editors.
Okay.
3 editors. On the second season, I was the supervising editor because I was the only editor returning from season 1, and I kind of built the tone and style of the show. And we'll just divvy it out. They'll shoot something one day, and we'll get there's like a spreadsheet we had that was like, okay, they shot this sketch, and I'm like, well, that one has Patti LaBelle in it, so I want it. Or Angela Bassett's in that one, so go ahead and give me that one. But we had such a great guest cast every year. There's so many celebrities that wanted to come play because they had such a great time on set. Yvette Nicole Brown is in both seasons because she's the judge in Black Lady Courtroom, but she just loves being on that set. She's just like, it's a great time, and she gave such great improv and reaction shots and things that I could use that I was always like, yeah, Yvette's back, let me get that one. But yeah, it was 3 editors, 45 sketches. And we just kind of powered through them and worked with Robin very closely. She's very hands-on in post because, you know, she's a comedian and she also knows what's funny. Issa Rae is like that too. She loves editing. She's like obsessed with it and knows what's funny. So it's great to collaborate with women like that who kind of know what they're looking for, but also are very collaborative and let you kind of play and pitch things. So it's really fun. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. No, you answered my question. I'm still recovering from 3 editors and 45 short films. I mean,
That's a lot of comedy timing to work
Right.
out. That's
Yeah.
a lot of joke.
Right.
You know,
But we have each
cuts.
other. We have each
Yeah.
other. And except for when we had to work from home because of COVID, the entire second season we had to work from home. So we had to rely on Zoom to be like, you
That's
know,
tougher.
That's hard.
hey, can you watch this in this band and tell me if it's funny? You know, like, and then whereas before I would just go in someone's
Yeah,
room
because
and go,
when you're in a room
hey.
together, you go like,
Yeah.
when's the beat that's funny? And
Yeah,
when's the,
and like watch someone's reaction and go, okay, that's not landing.
Yeah.
Don't really have that when you're working from home, but I had a great team. Stephanie and Jessica were a great team, and they had done comedy before, and so it was very like that part of it they got. It was more like, okay, Black Lady Sketch Show feels like this, and we all have to be on the same page when it comes to that editorially. So
I love that. Okay, so Euphoria has a feel too. And Aaron, I'm still on a different level recovering from the scene that I just watched. Like Frogger situation across the street. But you also recently won an Emmy for your work on Euphoria.
Thank you.
So coming into the second season of the show, what were you trying to achieve from the storytelling perspective with the editing?
So the second season of Euphoria has a very different feel, I think, than the first season, and that was intentional. I think the first season has a is more kind of structured. It has these kind of prologues where you get kind of the backstory of a character, and then each episode kind of, you know, tends to focus on one character. So it had this kind of, you know, a very, you know, rigid in a way format, and then it would kind of get creative within that. But the writer-director, Sam Levinson, he never wants to repeat himself. He always wants to keep pushing, keep being more creative, keep being more unexpected. And so for the second season, you know, he was like, we're gonna play with that. And sometimes there's these prologues, like we start, you know, the second season with the Fez, you know, backstory prologue. But then we break that convention, and you know, throughout the whole season, we played basically, and we like to see each episode as its own kind of almost mini movie, and we would approach it that way. We would say, well, this particular episode, what is this about? You know, what are the characters going through, and what is going to be the best way stylistically, you know, to tell this particular story? And obviously, we have kind of these principles of Euphoria that we like to, you know, kind of follow. You know, emotion is always primary, but we also like surprise. We like to do things that are unexpected, you know, and it could even just be in a cut, you know, when we're cutting, how we're holding. You know, we like to surprise and not do what we think maybe a sort of standard TV show would do. It's like, what can we do that will constantly keep the audience on their toes? And so
It's like there's a lot of tension in that too, right? There's way more tension in this season.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think we wanted to, you know, so, you know, when we start the editing, and, you know, the first thing we get is the script. And, you know, we start to think about, you know, what is going to be the best way to, you know, what is the feeling of this? What is the most important, you know, message of this episode? What is the character going through? What are the emotions that they're going to feel? Then the dailies come in, and then we jump into that, and then it develops over the course of the editing too. You know, so the little clip that we saw, this sort of Rue Runs episode, which is episode 5, that I edited, that one. The first cut of it was actually very different, and we changed and crafted it, you know, over the course, you know, of the editing, as we find, you know, each episode has its own unique voice, and so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to find that unique voice. And then sometimes this one scene you'll land on it, and it's like, this is the voice of the episode, and that'll kind of ripple out. And Sam is really creative too, and he also loves the editing process. And on a lot of shows, you'll put together the whole episode, and then the episode will be seen as a whole. But that's not how Sam likes to work. We edit individual scenes, and then we send those scenes to Sam while he's still shooting. And so sometimes, we'll send him a scene and he'll be like, oh, you took this scene in a completely different direction. But then he will actually change the script based on how we edited that scene. He'll be like, oh, wow, like there was a kind of more minor character here, and actually they really pop. So he'll start to shift the story and give that character more, to do in later episodes. And so there's this really interesting and I think kind of unusual kind of push and pull, between the editing and the shooting and the writing, and that's kind of how we end up with a second season that feels very different, I think, in some ways than the first. But it's a very organic process, and that's how he likes to work.
I mean, and it so resonated with what you said about like the editor will show you something, you're like, I didn't even see it like that before, right? Even though you thought you knew this character already. Right. Which brings me to the Pitch Perfect universe expanding, Kristi.
Yes.
Bumpers in Berlin. What could go wrong? Right?
Anything and everything.
Anything and everything, right? It's like, so this is the first time we're seeing Bumper on his own journey, right? Yeah. But we already know him from the Pitch Perfect franchise. So what is your approach when it comes to, kind of creating that world around that character when we've already seen him interacting in a different film?
Yeah, Bumper was an interesting character because he's the villain of the first movie. And so it was interesting to approach that from the perspective of we want to keep his comedy especially and some of his character pieces from the movie, but then also allow him to soften and open up and become a real person for the audience. And so it was fun to approach him from a totally different perspective. We, of course, started by watching the movies, and then we had all 6 scripts for the 6 episodes before we started cutting. So that was really helpful for us to see the arc and see where he was going and those places where they were trying to keep that version of Bumper that had been created for the movies, but also where we were going emotionally with him. And I think, we've all talked about it a little bit here, but really it's about the emotional impact. And for Bumper, again, starting as a villain, it's an interesting, and he's also a little, naive and he says things that aren't, socially appropriate, and, he's that kind of character. So it's like, how do we get an audience to fall in love with him? How do we get him to come off in a way that the audience will love him and love him with the other characters and see that softer side. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun to approach an established character in a new series and take him in a different direction. And a lot of that came with, they also did a lot of improv on this show. And so it was finding those takes and those versions of the comedy and of the lines that would take us in the direction that we wanted to go with his character.
Oh, that's beautiful. That actually gives me a great segue to Greg, because Bumper's got multiple versions of himself, and he probably thinks he's super, but Moon Knight is an actual superhero. So Moon Knight expands that Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you got Emmy nominated for your work on the show this year. So congratulations. So when you've got a character like Moon Knight, right, and several personalities, how do you approach the obstacle of having Oscar Isaac interacting with himself, right, while also communicating with the director and other cinematographers, so that it doesn't look like everybody, just like forgot what they were doing during the series?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, because part of the trick of Moon Knight is, if also like in the comics, is that there's a lot of like this unreliable narrator issue, which you don't really know what reality is, because the characters aren't just like overlap. And what we did with the scripts with our directors was, the idea was to start the show with not Mark Spector, who's the main personality, if you know the character in the story, but with Stephen Grant, who's its alternate. And Oscar decided to make him, he's in London, why don't I make him more English to make him visually more different and make a physicality more different. So the idea is, like, the first part of the show is it's from his perspective, so he doesn't know any of these things, and we get to discover the idea of where his true situation with Khonshu and with everything else. as with him. And so the idea was to not like we weren't like trying to shoot each character certain ways. We're let Oscar do the performance that would dictate how he would appear. And then the idea was to stick to the narrative, stick with the point of view with the audience and with the character we were with. So episode 1 is like from Steven's perspective, and when you get to episode 3, we flip more to Mark, and then Mark is the one not realizing what's happening because there's blinks right when it turns out that not Steven's taking over, but Jake Lockley, as we find out later. But that's sort of the idea, is to let the audience participate from their point of view or from the point of view of that character. And that dictate a lot of the like how we do things. Originally, when I started, there was only one director, Mohammed Diab, and I was the only cinematographer. And then Marvel realized, like, well, it's actually too much to take on in some of their shows for one director to do everything. So Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead were also doing the 2 episodes in the middle, did episodes 2 and 4, and Andrew Palermo was my partner in crime on the show, did those episodes. We would all overlap notes and talk a lot about that. And then the other thing with Oscar was the fascinating about the show with doing someone acting with themselves, even if he's in the mirrors or everything else, is he needs an acting partner, because part of the idea when you're doing twinning, if you've ever seen Dead Ringers, for example, which is way back in the days of film, with Jeremy Irons playing both characters, is that when he's acting with himself, like normally if an actor, especially with a scene with our directors, it can be a little bit improvisational at times, or want to be able to play at the scene and develop the scene. You want to be able to have someone to play with, right? You can't just act against marks and then just make up that character. So Oscar would have to play the scene so he can then figure out what each character is going to do. So his younger brother Mikey was with us, and he was his acting partner. And so he would do his work out the scene to let me start. So we'd figure out in the list the night before, is like the start in the morning, like, well, which character do we want to start with? And we'd sort of have a quick discussion with Muhammad and Oscar. It's like, well, it makes sense. It's like a Steven scene first. So okay, we'll start with Steven in the morning, which means Oscar will be thinking in the morning what makeup is going to do first, and also how we block the scene. So he'll be Steven. Give Mikey Mark's lines. They'll walk around. He'll also figure out where he's going to walk, because that'll develop the timing of it. And then he'll say, okay, now Mike, you do what I did, and I'm going to go back, and he'll then imagine what Mark would do. And then he'll sort of rough out the performance. And then when we're shooting, we'll usually have one maybe motion control or a lock-off shot where they're in the scenes together. And we do that, and that's a scene where we'll change over the mic up, so and we want to change the makeup once because it's like takes time consuming. So we work on all our coverage. That's why the blocking is important. And we start shooting the coverage of one personality first. Let's say Steven, and then we'll do a motion control shot where he does Steven. Then he'll go change. Then it'll become Mark. We'll repeat that shot, and then we'll do all of Mark's coverage afterwards. So it's a bit of a thing, but it's all worked out. The idea was to make it so that Oscar can then perform it and make it natural. That way his timing's very natural with himself. It's not like he's acting to with the timing of motion control, which seems like kind of artificial. That was the big thing to do that.
Is there room to like change the plan? It seems
Well,
like you have to plan it out very.
Well, that's why the block is important. Once you do like a, let's say, a motion control shot, once you record, which is like basically either a panning shot or something with the camera moves in 3D, you repeat it, then you're kind of locked into that timing. So you have to figure out which character is going to make the camera move, like who's walking first, who's the timing, and then the second part has to, run the timing of it. So as long as we get the timing right with the lines, he'll start walking the correct way, and you can see it on the monitor if it messes up. But once you do that, you're kind of locked into that.
It has to be
On the
that,
coverage, it's less of a problem because you can cut those in between. So.
Right.
Makes sense.
But-
So okay, while we got you talking about Moon Knight in that way, like, what cameras and lenses did you use to shoot your scenes? And because we want all the information too, like, why did you choose the cameras and lenses that you chose?
I wish there was an elegant answer to this, but it's the same camera we used that Joel used on Miss Marvel, which is a Arri Alexa. We used a mini LF because we needed to shoot a larger format for the delivery at a certain resolution. I wanted to use anamorphic lenses from Panavision, which I love very much, but they ran out. So I asked them very kindly, said, hey, I'm doing this Moon Knight thing, got hired. Like, oh yeah, no, we'll be fine. Then, of course, a few shows, like theirs went way longer, and then Mandalorian went long. I was like, okay, we don't have enough lenses for you. So I ended up using Arri Signature Primes, which are made by Airflex, and they're spherical lens, they're not anamorphic. I wanted to go anamorphic, but they also open up extremely wide, like down to 1.4. So you can create a similar look. I actually did side-by-side tests with those and some Cook anamorphics, which are also very nice, but the Cook anamorphics are very very heavy and very large, and they have minimum focus, which is sometimes an issue in cinematography. Is when I knew we were going to probably, part of the point of view we were discussing about how we shoot each character was we'll have the camera pretty close to, even in the clips you saw there, the camera's close to him a lot when he's in that perspective. And that's not very good with anamorphic because it doesn't focus very close. It can distort the face and make you look a bit chubby sometimes. And so that became actually the perfect choice for us. It was compact enough. We also carried some compact primes that are physically shorter, just to like the scenes in like cars and stuff where we built the camera to about this size. So Like if you were Austin, we'd be starting here,
Yeah.
and Robin would be in the back of the car like this, and be like into the mirror, into that kind of thing. And that's that's not something you can do with a big anamorphic lens. So
Because you're gonna hit somebody.
yeah, or it's too physically heavy and things like that. So you sort of, and that was something that sort of developed during prep actually. So you don't, even though you have a plan way in advance, you do have to kind of adapt to like the filmmaking style will develop over time. And that's sort of the thing that you want to have the tools that are flexible enough for that. I knew I needed a small camera, but the anamorphic thing, which I wanted initially, was in the end going to be the wrong choice. So
That's so cool. Okay, so again, the details. And Aaron, there's this phrase that comes up around Euphoria, maximalist palette, right? It's delicious just to say it, maximalist palette. Say more about this. This is a unique, like editing approach for this series.
Yeah.
What will you tell us about it?
So, maximalist palette. I mean, I think, one of the big things with Euphoria is that we always strive for, and this, comes from Sam, is like, he wants it to be cinematic, and that word can mean a lot of things, but it means unique, it means, unusual, it means surprising, it means, it means big, and so I think he's always trying to kind of push, the envelope of what a TV show, can look and sound and feel like. And it is, and we shot the second season on film, and Kodak actually created a whole batch of Ektachrome, which hasn't even existed in a long time, just for our show. So it gives this, again, that kind of like interesting cinematic, kind of extra.
and like a lot of
feel.
contrast too, right? Like
Yeah,
there's
it's
a
very
huge amount of
contrast,
contrast in the show even compared to last year.
Yeah. And I think that was part of, again, talking about first season and second season, to give the second season a unique look and a special look. But in terms of the editing too, and that kind of maximalist palette, we're given this kind of, embarrassment of riches of material that, Sam shoots, and the DP, Marcel, is just unbelievable. And then we get to play, and they are very, Sam likes to be very, and Marcel like to be very experimental, on set. They'll usually, so when I'm watching what we call the dailies, which is sort of the raw footage, the beginning of it will be kind of the as scripted, and then they play, and it's like, and sometimes I'll be watching the raw footage, and they'll be like, oh, the camera will move here to here, and then you'll hear Marcel be like, wait, what if we move from here to here, then to here, and then over to here? And it's like, oh, that is amazing. Like, so they're always kind of, pushing the envelope, and so we respond to that in the edit. We are looking for ways, to take advantage of, they give us all these different setups and all these different looks and all these different feels, and it's up to us to go through and sort of build it in the most interesting and emotional and exciting way. But on the other hand, sometimes it's all about, just holding on a shot. Like in that episode that we saw the clip from in episode 5, at the beginning, Rue has this kind of intervention breakdown with her family in the house. And there's this one moment, where her and her mom just butt heads, and they're like inches away from each other. And there's a shot of Rue, and I just held. And there's no cuts, and you just hold, and you just hold, and you just hold. And it's like, and it just becomes more and more uncomfortable, and you're just seeing all the little shifts in emotion in her eyes and the little twitch in her mouth. And it's like these little things. And probably the audience probably wants you to cut, but no, you don't. And it's just like you feel the emotion. And so sometimes when you say, maximalist, for us, I think the maximalist represents emotion. How do we maximize the emotion? And that may be an incredible, pan around the room, but it may be, and it may be like in that car scene, a cut and a cut and a cut and a move and a cut and a cut and a cut. It may be this really incredible frenetic energy, or it just may be holding and holding and holding. And those are both choices.
Yeah, because there's so much tension in that hold, because at that point, like, she's a volcano that might explode, right?
Exactly.
So if you just leave it there, you're just like, okay, now I'm scared because I'm now watching the
you're
lava's bubbling, and you're like,
feeling, So I think that's, so that maximalism, it can be visual, it can be music, it can be sound, and it's every single one of those choices are being made in the edit.
And you don't let the audience off the hook. Either way, like they're
No.
in it.
Yeah. No, you want to grab them and hold them, and they just, you know. That's our job. I feel like. You know.
And again, there's those layers, right? And you're talking about the music and the sound and everything. And so the Daysha, I want to dance with somebody. Like, here's this epic biopic that just came out, right? It just,
No, it comes out the 23rd.
Oh, 20, oh,
Yeah, it comes
I
out
don't know
23rd.
what day it is. It's just been one long day for the past 2.5 years. Okay, so it's about to come out. Okay, but here's this epic biopic, right, of someone that we're all very familiar with, legend-wise. What can you tell us about your work on the film?
I've been cutting I Want to Dance with Somebody for over a year. So it's probably the longest I've spent with the same footage. I can tell you that Naomi Aki is so impressive. I think that when I first got her dailies, I was just just blown away. She just became Whitney Houston. It's not mimicry. It's not, she's not pretending to be, or she's not mimicking her like movements. It's more of an embodiment. And so it was emotional to work on for the majority of the time. But I was always really impressed with all the performances. Stanley Tucci is in it, and he's hilarious and amazing and gracious, and it was really fun to cut. It was also very challenging to cut. There's a lot of obviously huge musical pieces in the film. There's a lot of pressure that goes into it because you're not just making decisions for the character. The character is a real person. So that it's a person who lived, and you have to honor and respect them, because that's the whole point, the whole reason for me begging to be on this film and meeting Casey Lemons and kind of fangirling and trying to be professional and not talk about Eve's Bayou for days and days. It was I told her, I was like, I loved Whitney Houston. I have seen other Whitney Houston films. I initially read the deadline report for this and said, why? Why do we need another Whitney Houston film? Why do we need another anything? There's documentaries, there's this and that. But after meeting with her and understanding what she wanted to do, it's the same thing I wanted to do, was put some respect on her name. And that's it. And so the movie it's a celebration of her life. She had a tragic ending. She was gone too soon, but the film is just a celebration of who she was as a person, as a human being. And I think a lot of people don't know her as a human being because she's an icon. When you're an icon, people just kind of see you as that. But there was a person behind all of that, and so the film does a great job of exploring that. But it's difficult because you want to make decisions just to move the characters, the story. You just want to move it forward. But then you have to fact check it. You have to go, well, wait, is this what happened? Is this how Whitney would have felt about this? We did a lot of, I did a lot of research because I grew up listening to Whitney, but I didn't know her as a person. I've never met her. So I watched every interview and kind of in order. I started in the 80s and then went to the 90s and then went to the 2000s, and you can see her change. You can see how she changed. She started off very professional, and I'm answering the question, and she had a high-pitched voice, and she was a teenager, and you could see a change. Like, she started to become more real. Her answers became more irritated because they were asking her dumb questions, and when she was a teenager, she had to accept those dumb questions and just answer and be nice and smile and be the America's princess, and I think you could see her get tired of that. So I always found that very interesting, and I was like, wow, it would be great to kind of show that, and really there are things that weren't a part of the script, but I wanted to really talk about the media's presence in her life, because that's something that none of us have to deal with when we're not okay. We can kind of, pull it together, like grab our family, grab our friends, and kind of hold on to each other and, go, I need to fix this, or I need to work on this, or I'm having a bad day, I'm just going to stay home today, that type of thing. But when you're an icon, you can't really do that. There's no downtime. So in post, Casey and I very much we were like, okay, we have to add this sort of element. There's a lot of flashing lights and things that will irritate the audience. It's like, because she was irritated. And I want you to feel how irritated she was. So yeah, I had a great time working on it. Excited for it to come out. It was a labor of love because and it's fun. It's very we've tested it a couple of times and people are just dancing and singing along and crying, obviously, because it's emotional.
Right. But it's music.
It's
right?
music.
That's part of the music. Is so. I mean, Kristi, you got the music too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Bumper's having the same journey as Whitney.
Definitely not.
I'm guessing. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm going to take a risk and say he's not. But you've got these musical numbers, right, that you had to edit around. So give us a little bit about that. What was your process in relation to cutting the music?
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I had been on a musical show before, Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, and so I did have some experience working with musicals, and especially in television format. But it was a really interesting process because in Bumper, each episode has really unique and different musical numbers. So sometimes they're dream sequences, sometimes they're kind of romantic fantasy, sometimes they're straight, happening in the moment, the classic Pitch Perfect riff-offs, and those are supposed to be real, happening, And then there's always this element of being very choreographed, very, put together, because that's kind of part of the Pitch Perfect world. And so we were really fortunate to have, frequently we had kind of a previs sequence that would come in from the director or producers being like, this is what we're thinking, but then beyond that, we would get a lot more footage. So in our dailies, we'd have a lot more to work with, but it kind of gave us the direction they were thinking of going, but then we also got to play around quite a bit with, okay, this is what I was feeling in the moment, especially when you're trying to hit those emotional beats and, actual rhythm beats and getting a performance out of someone who's singing. I'm sure you dealt with this a lot too, is you sometimes, finding that emotion through their eyes while they're singing is the next step of it's not just the words coming out, it's not just the vocals, it's about what's coming through their eyes, what's coming through their performance. And so it was a really fun process. All of my episodes, I had such a good time cutting the musical sequences, and I also had multiples in each episode. Usually, we had multiple musical sequences, and so it was really a playground of, being able to try out different things and play around with the tone and feel of those musical numbers.
Okay, so I have one final question for each of you. I'm just going to ask you to go down the line. And there's probably someone watching that they're either thinking about editing or they're thinking about cinematography, and they don't know where to begin. And I kind of want you to go back, a little bit back in your mind and think about a piece of advice that you would have loved to have known, to heard,
Or gone.
To have heard from someone, as you were venturing into your career. And, Erin, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I would say if you're interested in getting into professional editing, get involved in the editing community. Meet other editors. The editing community is actually, it feels actually kind of small. It's kind of intimate in a lot of ways, but it's also very friendly and very open.
So kind of
nice. There are editors. For whatever reason, this particular job, the kind of person that it attracts, it's a lot of really amazing, really good people. And so meet other editors and and I know, I bet all of us, we get a lot of people, sending us messages online and saying, oh, hey, sorry to bother you, like, can I, would you do, could I ask you about how you got started in your career or whatever? And it's like, and we love that. It's like, it's not bothering us. And so don't be afraid.
It's not bothering them.
Yeah, don't be afraid to like reach out.
approach.
Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to editors. We're a very friendly bunch, and we have a really tight community. But that's what you want to do. You want to meet as many editors as possible because one of them might be able to get you a job or at least point you in the right direction. Get you started.
Yeah.
Kristi.
One thing I would say from the editorial standpoint is learning how to communicate. And that would be, for me, it would be about how to communicate your ideas and also how to talk in a room full of directors and producers. And a lot of that comes with experience. I was gonna say, as I'm sure we all know, it's like a lot of that is being in the room, but I think it's learning the verbiage of editorial and learning how, when you have an idea come to you in the edit room when you're practicing, how would you express that to another person? I think that can go such a long way in building the relationships in the editorial room. And that's like one of the biggest parts of editorial to me is your relationships. And so, because then you can openly communicate and honestly communicate about your ideas and what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And it can be a safe space for all of the creatives in the room.
Yeah, really good.
Great.
I don't know if I can do. It's gonna be a slightly longish answer. So the fun thing is, we actually didn't talk about this actual cinematography thing, but the two things are obviously it's photography, which is something that's good to understand and learn and watch as many films and everything else to be inspiring. But I didn't come to it out of a love of photography. I wasn't a still photographer that learned to shoot films. It was all about sort of filmmaking and storytelling. And the one common thing to all of our answers tonight was emotion, interestingly enough. And that's the thing that in the end, kind of like for me, is what the thing is, what all the storytelling elements are most driven by and most interesting is about what is the emotion and also what's the point of view in the story. Mm-hmm. So one of the fascinating things for me is like, and all the work I've done in the last few years, like the Moon Knight thing in common with Watchmen was sort of point of view, like the episode 6 of Watchmen, This Extraordinary Being, which watch Hooded Justice as he's young, when he's younger and he's like bullied by these racist cops and he gets high. It's a horrifying scene, but the entire thing is sort of a dream space thing that Sister Night experiences when taking these memory pills. And so it was very much take the audience and transport them into her version of what she sees of his life, which seems complicated, but it's all about reliving an experience for a character and trying to create what that would be, which is more about point of view than it is about necessarily only lighting. And then of course expanding how you'd use lighting and how the mood would be to also show the right point of view in a scene. Like they're all sort of related. It's not less a technical thing. That's what sort of I think that's what separates the people that are really. I mean, we're all obviously quite geeky about this stuff. So, but that's what actually is what the fact thing is about. So, anything to understand more about that and learn about that, I think, or the point of view. Like, pay attention to a film. Like, why is the camera where it is? So sometimes there's a lot of films you can see which have no point of view, and it's pretty evident because they usually don't. They don't grab you. You finish them like, I understood the story, but they don't move you. And then try and pay attention to those ones that do, and try and figure out kind of why. And that in the end really inhabits that. And also just shoot everything you can. If you want to be a cinematographer, shoot. I mean, everyone's making a short film. I did tons of short films when I got out of film school, and that just like experiment, and just do what you can, and also really enjoy it because it really helps if you're on the crew and you're enjoying what you're doing because it's hard work for everybody and no one likes to work for a grumpy boss. So
that applies to editing too.
Yeah.
Edit as much as
Man, they said all the good ones. Let's see. No, I think all of what they said is absolutely correct. And I think that what I find with a lot of assistant editors or people who want to try to follow the path to become an editor and sit in the chair, like you have to network. Mm-hmm. You don't just have to network. So it's not. I think a lot of people play the game like it's not Game of Thrones. It's not like it's not that serious. I think you have to study the craft. You have to understand that it's a craft. And that when your time comes up, you have to be ready. And it isn't your time just because you networked and you met so-and-so and you ended up here. Because as soon as you get there, if I see that you don't know what you're doing, I know what happened, And I think that what I always find impressive about young people, and I can say that now. I just realized I can say that now.
I'm the oldest. I get to say that.
I appreciate that. Take that off me. But no, what I've realized is that there is like slowly it becomes more of a status thing, and it's not for us. I think editing is, I think I can speak for you, it's our passion. It's what we love to do, and it is an art form. So I'm impressed when I see that in a younger person, and I see that they've done the work, they've studied the history, they've started to develop their own style of editing. They've started to understand what their instincts are.
Or what their strengths are, perhaps, right?
What their strengths are, and they're asking about their weaknesses.
Yeah.
They're asking, like, how come I'm not getting this part? Can you help me understand this a little bit better? That's more impressive to me than, okay, can I meet this person?
And then the optics.
Yeah.
And then
of everything.
the optics of everything. And also, I will say that what Kristi said is absolutely important. When you're an editor, you're in a room with somebody for a very long time.
Yeah.
For a very long time.
With lots of sharp objects around.
Yeah, and like things you could throw and things like that. And you have to, not necessarily, you have to be likable. Like, you end up working with people who hired you because they decided at some point they liked you, right? And that they could spend a lot of time with you. But it's important that you be able to communicate accurately and thoroughly what you're trying to say about something, what a decision you're making.
Can I just interject one thing what you're saying? I think, like, to make a sports analogy, it's like the time in the bullpen is not wasted. So if the idea of when you're young, it's like, oh, I'm ready now. I know how to do this. Like, that's, that's when you start. And then also that's fine. Like, to be in that, let's say, I've worked on a few TV series with multiple cinematographers, and with some work I admire greatly. And that's an incredible opportunity to learn, right? We share problems. And it's like time in the bullpen is not really wasted. It's not like a rush to get on stage. It's like a rush to get near people making things and to learn more and more. And so that you're even more ready when you
And we're always learning.
Yeah.
Not
Oh,
now.
absolutely.
I think that's
Every
the
scene
way
you
too.
cut, there's
It's
something
like
to
every
learn.
episode.
The emotion, the human aspect, the networking, the everything. And you all brought it here with us. Thank you so much, Aaron, Kristi, Greg, Daysha. This has been amazing.